credit cards are bad, right? Not necessarily.
According to Dave Ramsey.
Exactly. No, they don't have to be bad. It depends on the user. It's just like money, right? People say that money is the root of all evil. No, money's amoral. It just depends on how you use it. Are you using it for good or are you using it for bad? Same thing with HELOCs and credit cards. It doesn't make them inherently bad. It just depends on how you use them. Still hear Dave Ramsey say banks don't do cash value life insurance. I'm like, anybody can research this.
You can look it up and find it. Last time I looked, Bank of America had $24.5 billion in cash value for tier one lending. That's more than zero.
19 billion in residential real estate. You think banks know less than Dave Ramsey? No, they've been around for centuries and will always make money. It's one of the most archaic ways to make money and the easiest ways to make money.
As a caveat for everybody listening, Dave Ramsey does good for a lot of people. Just as you said, everybody can wear yoga pants. Not everybody should.
I had a buddy that started in real estate 5 years ago. Now he's a multi-millionaire in real estate, and he started with one freaking flip. Then he got into wholesaling, and then he got into buy and holds and commercial. Now he's getting into Airbnbs. You start somewhere. 5 years may sound like a long time if you start now, but over the grand scheme of things, that's not a very long time.
We get demographic. Our age group gets so caught up in the immediate satisfaction, and the younger generation even worse, where it's like, I want to make $1 million next year. Well, you made 30 grand last year, so that's kind of a big step. How about we go for 100 first? And you have to have the long-term view without getting caught up in that short-term satisfaction. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Cash Flow Conversations. Today, I have a certified badass as a guest. He is a business owner, entrepreneur here locally in Franklin, Tennessee, and he created a financial course, which he calls a real-world tactical educational course, which I absolutely love because it teaches people exactly how money works and what they can do to take control over their life. So Mike Lush is my guest. Michael Lush, it's good to have you here, my friend.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Matt.
It's funny, man, your office is like 200 yards away from mine too, but it looks better when we do a podcast like this.
Yeah.
So it's good to have you, man. So your company is called Replace Your University, and I've had a chance to go through a number of your lessons, and I love what you're teaching. So give me a quick background on Replace Your University.
Yeah, it actually started out, oddly enough, in 2014 as a victim banks, because I had a financial mentor, still do, who was very big into insurance, as you are. And, was talking about the banking system, which I kind of understood the banking system. I came from that. And so I started the company as a Victor Banks. And then after about a year or two, we started building relationships with banks because one of our tools that we use is a home equity line of credit. And the banks weren't too kind to the domain of a Victor Banks. So we changed it to Replace Your Mortgage. And that was our original product, and it's still our bread and butter today. And what we do is we teach people how to properly finance real estate. A lot of folks don't realize that there's an alternative to the modern day mortgage. And I specifically said modern day mortgage because mortgages didn't always look like they do today. They were very different if you go back a little over 100 years. But people don't realize there's an alternative to financing real estate, whether you're purchasing or refinancing or buying rentals or Airbnbs, vacation homes, et cetera. There is an alternative that you don't have to use the modern day inefficient death pledge of a mortgage. You can actually use simple interest open-end lines of credit. Now, it's not for everybody. I learned this in 2009 from another financial mentor that owned a hedge fund. I've actually got a buddy in the banking industry that's got a really cool saying, not very PC, but nonetheless, I don't really worry so much about offending people. He says, you know what, Michael, this is a lot like yoga pants. Everybody can wear them, but not everybody should. And it's true. You've got to be cash flow positive to execute on some of these strategies. What I mean by cash flow positive is you got to have more money coming in than what's going out. And unfortunately, in this country today, there's just too many Americans that are living paycheck to paycheck. And, COVID exposed that. When we hit COVID and checks stopped coming in, it's like, okay, now you're starting to see foreclosures ramp up, and then the government steps in and has this deferral program or forbearance program. And, a lot of people just got caught with their pants down. So it isn't for everybody, but if I wouldn't necessarily say mastered your budget, but if you're on top of it, you understand that the margin between what's coming in and what's going out is vitally important. If you're at that point, then some of the strategies that we teach make a whole lot more sense than financing on the archaic mortgage. So we focus heavily on home equity lines of credit and business lines of credit and commercial lines of credit.
And other people's money, basically.
Yeah. And it's funny because, when I learned this in 2009 from a hedge fund mentor. At the time, he was worth 600 million. Now he's a billionaire. He had explained to me that, mortgages are financial crack to middle America. The poor can't afford them and the rich don't use them. I understood the whole poor part, but I was like, what do you mean by the rich? And really what I was trying to do in one of our meetings when he was out of Connecticut, but his parents lived in Nashville. So from time to time, he'd come in to hang out with his parents and stop by my office to check up on me and also check up on the business, because his hedge fund had pledged $25 million to our company to kind of resurrect after the meltdown. So he was also checking up on his money too.
Yeah.
But, I had approached him about getting his sphere of influence. I said, listen, I do mortgages, and by default, you somewhat own this company. The profits are vitally important to you getting your money back. How about I get in your sphere of influence, and I can peddle the mortgages to the rich people that you hang out with. And that's when he said that, we don't use mortgages. And I said, okay, that's kind of what I assumed. You just pay cash for everything. He said, no. He said, understand, I run a hedge fund. He said, we are the kings of using other people's money. So no, we still use other people's money, institutional money sometimes, and that would be a bank. And that's when he hit me with a home equity line of credit. And everything up until that point, I was indoctrinated and trained in the mortgage industry, especially during the subprime days, that a HELOC was a credit card on your home. And credit cards are bad, right? No, not necessarily.
According to Dave Ramsey.
Exactly. No, they don't have to be bad. It depends on the user. It's just like money, right? People say the money is the root of all evil. No, money's amoral. It just depends on how you use it. Are you using it for good? Or are you using it for bad? Same thing with HELOCs and credit cards. It doesn't make them inherently bad. It just depends on how you use them. And so he only spent 15 minutes to explain this to me. And I probably spent a little over a year trying to honestly debunk it, because he basically called me a dope dealer, a financial dope dealer. And for years, I'd been doling thousands of these mortgages out, thinking I'm doing a good thing. And he just basically just took my house of cards and it came crumbling down by calling me a financial dope dealer. So I tried to debunk it for a year. And the more I tried to disprove it, the more it made a heck of a lot more sense. So if we were to fast forward in 2011, I convinced my wife, as we're building a new house, that once we build this house and move into it, I'm going to flip the mortgage, an FHA mortgage, into a first position home equity line of credit. And she's like, you're the financial guy. This sounds crazy, but whatever. And it took me a while. It took about 6 months, honestly, calling banks, talking to bank executives, talking to bankers who are notoriously stupid. I always say that bankers are stupid and loan officers are smart, right? And the reason being is bankers are generalists. If you walk into a bank branch and talk to a banker, they'll open up a checking account for you. They're almost like robots. I'll open up a checking account for you, a savings account for you. If you want a home equity line of credit, you want a mortgage or whatnot, I'll do all that. So they're generalists. And
nothing against bankers, but you have to start somewhere, right? And the banker has an opportunity to move forward. But to your point, it's a generalist because that's their role inside the bank. Mm-hmm. That's why they're getting paid. They're supposed to help everybody with everything. And from there, they can pick a specialty.
And it's also how they get paid. Bankers don't typically get a commission to do home equity lines of credit. They're based on a salary, right? So, even a branch manager at a bank is lucky to get $85,000 to $95,000 a year. So they're just saying, hey, if this is what you want, no problem. Sign here. This is what I'll do for you. And they're not incentivized to get you approved because their paychecks continue to come in from the bank. And the reason why I say loan officers are smart is loan officers are heavily commission based. Very few loan officers have some type of salary, and even if it is, it's really small. Where they're going to put food on the table is at closing table, or actually at the funding table. You close first, and you got 3 days, unless it's a purchase to fund. So they have to make sure that these things close and fund in order to get paid. And because of that incentivization, loan officers have to get very strategic. So when they come across an obstacle or hurdle, whether it's qualification wise or whatnot, then they have to figure out ways to lower the debt ratio or manipulate things in order to get you approved. So that's why I say loan officers are smart and bankers are stupid. And I witnessed this firsthand as I'm talking to these different bankers at these different banks and credit unions saying, hey, I only have 10% equity, but that's okay because you'll do 90% financing. So I want to replace my existing mortgage from a mortgage to a home equity line of credit. And just like everybody else that we still face to this day, 10 years later, is how do I take 10% equity to pay off a 90% loan? It's like, because I just want to refinance. I'm not asking to just for the 10% to pay off 90%. I just want you to refinance my existing mortgage. That was just, believe it or not, incredibly hard to get them to understand, because everybody assumes that a home equity line of credit is only a second lien position product. And it's only a loan based on the equity that you have in your home above and beyond what you owe in your mortgage.
Right.
People never think of it as a tool that can sit in first lien position, just like any other mortgage.
And when you say first lien, that means that there is no mortgage. It is the only loan on that asset.
Exactly. Just like, there's lots of people in this world today that will have an FHA loan and it has mortgage insurance, and they get 20% equity. What do? They refinance their FHA loan to a conventional to get the mortgage insurance to fall off, right? They didn't use the 20%. They just replaced the existing lien on there, the mortgage, from this type of mortgage to this type of mortgage.
Yeah.
Well, no one ever stopped to think, well, why can't I replace the mortgage with a different type of debt tool, a simple interest open-end line of credit? And so it was tough, but I eventually did it. And that was closer to 2012 when I did it. And by 2016, actually, the beginning of 2016, we paid off our house. And I didn't change anything about our budget. Now, I will say this. I went broker than broke in 2008. So once we got to this point, I was on a budget. I understood what my burn rate was. And my burn rate was substantially lower than what my income was. And I'll also be transparent that my income at the time was not your typical American's income. So that's why I was able to do it so quick. I had probably a $4,500 a month burn rate, but I was making anywhere from 15 to 20 grand a month as the senior vice president of a federal bank out of Chicago. So, had good income, better than the average American, and also understood finances and budgeting. So I had that to my advantage, but I didn't change anything about how I was budgeting. I just changed where my cash flow went. So instead of donating my money to the bank for a nominal 0.24% return on my checking account, I was able to deposit 100% of my funds into this open-end line of credit, which is a home equity line of credit. So people don't realize that mortgages used to be that way. A mortgage prior to 1913 was a two-way street. Money could go in and out freely.
Oh, really?
And yes, I always use this example. In fact, it was, I don't know if you're a fan of Yellowstone. Do you watch Yellowstone? And there was a spinoff of, there was a spinoff of Yellowstone that was 1924 or something like that with Harrison Ford. And there's a scene that probably most people didn't pay attention to, but because of my background, I recorded it and I took a screenshot. Like, oh, that was awesome. So he goes into the bank, and this is when the Dutton Ranch was struggling, and they had a harsh winter and didn't have crops and stuff to sell. So he went to the bank to get a loan based on this ranch that was basically free and clear. And they wouldn't give it to him. And he said, well, we've got this new thing out that I think will be beneficial to you. And it's a mortgage. And he said, what the mortgage is going to do is give you the luxury of time. And Harrison Ford looks at the banker and says, only a banker would consider a mortgage a luxury. And I'm like, oh man, I've got to keep that one. But, let's say prior to 1913, you're a farmer, you own a $200,000 farm, which would have been a large farm at that time, and you owe $100,000 on it. And you're like, I need $10,000 worth of equipment. I'm using easy numbers. Back then, that's not what farms were. They were like $7,000 or something like that. But we're just using easy numbers that we can relate to today. So I need $10,000 to buy equipment. And then, so what they would do right then and there, it's like, okay, yeah, it's worth 200. You owe 100. Here's $10,000. We'll change the deed. It's 110. When you sell your crops and make $20,000, you just dump it right back into your mortgage. So we've all heard the stories of our grandfathers, great grandfathers. Oh, back in my day, we'd get a house and we'd pay it off in 10 years. There's a couple of reasons for it. One, I think it was just a better generation. They didn't have things that would distract them from a proper education, like TV, internet, stuff like that. They read books and networked more than we do to this day. So I think that was just a better generation. But they also had better financing tools. The mortgage back then allowed them to utilize 100% of their cash flow. Well, that stopped in 1913. And I always ask this question. You would know it, but what do you think happened in 1913? It kind of changed the mortgage industry as we know it today.
Well, 1913 is when the IRS was created.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, yeah, but it was a little bit, I wouldn't say before that, it was the exact same time, but there was a reason why the IRS was created as well on top of this, the
Oh,
Federal Reserve.
yeah.
Yeah, Federal Reserve. So the Federal Reserve, which I don't know if did you watch the news yes, I'm sure you watched the news yesterday. That's
The rates.
yes. Oh my goodness. Rates for the next 3 years, they are projecting that will continue to drop for the next 3 years, which is unprecedented. So, anyways, we kind
But
of
yeah,
saw
how
it
much do you
coming.
think that is talking points for views?
For the market.
Yeah.
Um, I think that they understand because what I've been watching for probably 8 months to a year is the commercial side. And people don't realize that a lot of commercial paper, like, this building, I'm in a Class A building, 6-story building, and that paper is owned by banks, and that paper is typically on 3-year arms. So a lot of these owners of these buildings finance this paper on 3-year arms. Well, what was going on 3 years ago? Two and a half,
Interest rates were nothing.
2.75. Yeah, exactly. Well, now, plus you have COVID, where now it's almost normal to work from home. Heck, my company, we've got, I don't know, maybe 50, a little less than 50 people. And you've been to my office, about 4,000 square foot, and we've got like 4 people here.
Yeah.
It just becomes normal to work from home. If you hire the right people,
Yeah.
you can actually get the same productivity without the overhead.
Yeah.
So a lot of people just haven't come back into the commercial space, and it's not as necessary as it once was prior to COVID. But now that we're in 2023 and interest rates on commercial paper are 7 to 9%, those arms are adjusting. Well, now the payment for these buildings is more than tripling. On top of that, their vacancy is 50% of what it was in 2020 when they financed the building. And we're seeing telltale signs even in this building. I think it was this week we had the property owner come in and look at all the offices and stuff. They're already hitting us up multiple times and saying, "Hey, are you going to renew?" I'm like, "I don't have to renew for a year. Why are you asking me
They're
this?"
fishing. They want to find out.
Exactly. Well, they're also building projections too. I think what they're doing is they're trying to build projections to offload this paper. So I've got another buddy that's very astute to the commercial side because he's technically a billionaire. I wouldn't call him a liquid billionaire, but on asset wise, he's a billionaire commercial real estate developer. So he's given me 5 different places to research all this stuff. And he said that, this is where it's going to hit first, is on the commercial side. And exactly why I was explaining to you is you've got all this paper that's having to be refinanced because the payments have now more than tripled and the vacancies are 50% of what they used to be. And it's a crunch. And if you thought banks held a lot of residential paper, when it comes to commercial, holy crap. I mean, you go to FDIC.gov and research balance sheets of any bank out there, which we can get into when it comes to insurance. Remind me on that one too, because they actually own more in bank-owned life insurance than they do in residential real estate. I don't care what bank you look at, whether it's Wells Fargo, Bank of America, anybody can research this.
We'll make sure to get into that.
Yes, because I still hear Dave Ramsey say banks don't do cash value life insurance. I'm like, anybody can research this.
You can look it up. You can look it up and find it. It's like last time I looked, Bank of America had $24.5 billion in cash value for tier 1 lending.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's more than zero.
19 billion in residential real estate. So, anyways, you think banks know less than Dave Ramsey? No, they've been around for centuries and will always make money. It's one of the most archaic ways to make money and the easiest ways to make money.
As a caveat for everybody listening, Dave Ramsey does good for a lot of people. Just as you said, everybody can wear yoga pants. Not everybody should. He's very good for a lot of people. But when you eventually graduate from that line of thinking, just like your guy told you, a mortgage is for the middle class and wealthy people, poor people and wealthy people don't use them. So it's not necessarily all bad, but you got to figure out what you want in life before you start doing it.
Yeah, and also stay inside of your wheelhouse too. It's like, people don't come to me for budgeting expertise. I don't do that. I do the more advanced stuff. And if you want to do that, go to Dave Ramsey. Vice versa, when it comes to this more strategic stuff of how to, leverage debt to generate wealth, Dave Ramsey's not it. I'm sorry. He's just dead wrong on a lot of things. Not everything, but on a lot of things, it's either he doesn't know or he's just not being truthful.
I think he's pandering to his audience because he knows who his listeners are. He's not stupid. And he also sells products. He gets paid in referral fees for selling those financial products like term life insurance. But it's easy to disprove
and
mortgages. It's easy to disprove his theory. And I do this all the time with clients. It's like, okay, if you can get 12% in your mutual fund, why would you pay off your house? If your house is, call it 7%. By paying off your house at 7% and avoiding the 12% growth, it's costing you millions of dollars over your lifetime. That's why I wrote my book called Don't Be Debt Free and Broke. I'd rather have the ability to pay off the house, and this is why I like meeting you, because I didn't understand how powerful HELOCs could be. So let's keep going in the story though, because the value of other people's money and how you set it up and why it makes sense is fascinating. So we were talking about commercial buildings. They're going to become expensive. Are you going to, I don't know if your landlord's listening, but are you going to renew your office, or what are you thinking?
Contemplating it, not at the terms that they're offering right now, because they're offering it at what the market is showing right now. However, I think they're in a pinch, and that's just my gut. I don't know that they are, but you walk around this building, we're also at 50% occupancy.
Yeah.
And I think the reason why they're reaching out is they're in a pinch. They're looking to build projections to offload this paper or to sell it to somebody else.
Yeah.
So I'm going to wait, and I can almost guarantee you I'm going to get a better deal than what they're offering now.
So what you're doing is leveraging time, because they're looking for you to give them an answer, but you're like, I don't know what the market's going to be in 12 months, so I'm not going to tell you. And so this is the power of negotiation and setting things up correctly, is that you have a choice now. And so many people make financial choices that limit their ability to pivot in later years. And so, that negotiating power is very important.
Yes. Yeah. And there's other things that we would like to do potentially for office space because, outside of the tutorials here in Franklin, there's really no reason for all of us, including my partners, to be in Franklin. So we've toyed with the idea of buying land around the Columbia area and building a barn dominium on there. And then with the lean-tos have offices there, but we also, which we could probably get into later on, is we have another facet of our company called Replace Your Mindset, where we do somewhat militant boot camps. And now we could repurpose this barn dominium for, boot camps. We'll have land to do some of the rucking and tough stuff that we do with Replace Your Mindset. We could rent it out for events. So you got to have multiple exit strategies. People are like, well, why wouldn't you just buy a commercial building? Dude, I made that mistake in 2007 when the mortgage crash came and the real estate crash came. Me and two other buddies got under contract to buy a $16 million golf course that had 1,000 acres and it was real estate development around the golf course. So as people are running out of the burning building that is real estate, we were dumb enough to try to jump into it. So no, I'm not going to buy a commercial building, because I think a lot of people are trying to exit that space right now because it's not as lucrative as it once was. Yes, you might be able to get discounts on it, but I'm not going to make the same mistake twice.
Yeah.
But going back to the Federal Reserve in 1913, people used to deposit 100% of their income into mortgages for safekeeping because they knew they had access to it. And that was a way for them to stay liquid, but also pay off debt. After 1913, Federal Reserve is instituted as the backstop of banks and allows banks to execute what's called fractional reserve lending. So for every dollar you put in a bank account, they really have 10 to lend out. Sometimes there's a 15-to-1 ratio if you're a credit union, but for by and large, community banks have a 10-to-1 ratio. So if you give them $100,000, they can lend out $1 million. You give them $1 million, they can lend out $10 million. And in order to really continue that cycle, banks were desperate and starving for deposits. Fast forward 100 years later, where do we find ourselves? Banks are starving for deposits. So what they came up and devised the plan of is, how do we get access to more deposits? How do we make the average American deposit money into our coffers? And they looked at mortgages. Where the average American, where are they storing their cash? It's not under the mattress. It's inside of their mortgage. So that's when they changed the mortgage. They made a mortgage a closed-end product where it goes in freely, but it doesn't come out freely.
That happened in 1913?
Just shortly after that, yeah. Banks got together. So 1913 was the Federal Reserve, and then once they started understanding it, they're like, oh my goodness, we need more deposits because we can grow this. And
what you just described is something that I've described with clients too, in the idea that people can sit on pride when they say, I have 200,000 of equity in my home. And my comment is always, it's not yours.
Mm-mm.
It's not your equity. And the proof is, it's just kind of like saying a 401k is not yours. Okay, if it's yours, bring it to my office.
Yep.
Bring it in. You cannot get the equity out of your home until you go to a third-party lender and either borrow the third party's money, which, by the way, they want that back, or you sell the property, in which case you don't have the home anymore. So the equity is never yours. It's this idea of like you have it, but it's not real. And so that line of credit, it's a beautiful mind shift. And I think you just described it well of the mortgage is a closed product. You can only put money in, you can't get money out. And where it used to be an open product where it was a free transaction in and out.
Yeah, so we're not really doing anything new. We're just kind of going back to basics of the way that we used to finance real estate as Americans prior to 1913. And that's what a HELOC is. Money can move in and out freely 24/7. So instead of, being that victim to the bank where you walk into the bank and they got to sign up, says, hey, we offer 0.5% checking account. Oh man, that's attractive. Yeah, let me go over there and hand you my 10 grand. And then you're talking to the teller and you're like, you know what? I'd also like a loan on my home or a loan to buy a home. Oh yeah, no problem. Let's walk around on the other side. And Joe Loan Officer over here is offering 6%. The teller, not technically, it's more complicated, but the teller just walked your money over to him, and now you borrowed your own money back at that rate. It's called arbitrage. That's how they make money. So a HELOC allows you to operate just like a checking account. People don't realize that in a home equity line of credit, you get online bill pay options. You've got a credit card associated with the home equity line of credit. You got ATM capabilities associated with the home equity line of credit. So the way I look at it, I paid my house off once. I don't know. I won't say ever. Ever is a long time. I have no plans of paying the house off again, right? For me, it is a vessel to store cash and for me to utilize 100% of my income. So instead of putting a portion of my money into a checking or a savings account or a CD or money market, that is sleeping money. It's not doing anything for me. However, depositing into my home equity line of credit, every dollar is utilized, but I still maintain liquidity 24/7. So if I put it in there 5 minutes later, I could take it all back out again if I wanted to. But you have to be strategic about leveraging with your home equity line of credit. So I look at it, it's a vessel to store cash, and there are no limitations to it. It can consume 100% of my income. And then from there, I invest. I know invest is kind of a touchy word on this topic, but then I put money into my policies up to my MEC limit. And then from there, I determine what investments I want to participate in. So I look at those as two vessels to store cash that I get benefit for my income, which is my most precious asset is my cash flow. I get benefit of every single dollar. Every dollar just got assigned a job and is working for me, either suppressing interest or growing interest, uninterrupted compounding interest. And then from there, I determine how I leverage that even further for higher yield investments.
And at the end of the day, you're doing exactly what that, now billionaire said, is you're using other people's money and you're taking care of your family. The death benefits can satisfy something. If you were to pass away, your family can pay off any debts that you might have, and they get tax-free money. You have money that's guaranteed to grow inside of a policy that you could liquidate at any time. And you've also created an option where interest rates right now are crazy high. My HELOC is like 10%. I just saw the other day. My life insurance is like 4.5%. So if I want to borrow money, am I going to go to the HELOC or should I go to the insurance company? I get to choose. And and now that I have that choice, I'm in control. It's all about having these choices instead of locking your money up, being stagnant in one vehicle. I always talk about money in motion stays in motion. These are scientific principles. I want my money to be moving. I don't want it to sit there and stay because if it stays in the bank, for example, like you said, the bank's got it in motion. They're lending that money out over and over. In Wall Street, they're just gambling back and forth and they're making all the commissions and the fees and my money's at risk and they're getting paid.
Yeah, we have to start thinking like banks do. We think that, okay, well, this is exclusive to banks. How they operate and how they look at money and how they utilize money is completely exclusive to them. That is not the case. We have tools as average Americans that we can operate just like a bank does. And, one of the things that we have to understand is that, if we deposit money in the bank, a lot of people consider that deposit an asset, not only to themselves, but also to the bank. And it's neither. That is not an asset to you. And let me explain why. Because of inflation. I understand that inflation is coming down, but whatever the bank's giving you as far as a return for your deposit is not going to keep up with the cost of inflation, which means what? Your money's going backwards. That is the definition of a liability. So it's a liability to you. But why is it also a liability to the bank? Because now you're under contract that the bank has to give you that money back anytime you want, plus interest. So that also becomes a liability to the bank. So how does the bank turn that liability into an asset is they need to lend it out at a higher margin.
Mm-hmm.
And really anybody can do that. If I've got $10,000 in a checking account and a buddy needs $5,000, then I can say, okay, I'm going to give you this $5,000 at 10, 12%, and you're going to pay me 2 points. Okay, now I just turned that liability into an asset because I've got more margin and more rate of return on what I was getting inside of the bank, which I don't put it in the bank. I'll put it in the HELOC or my insurance policy. We've done this with my wife, with her business. We've done it so many different ways. So when we talk about banks and operating like a bank, this is what they do. You go back to our earlier conversation where we're talking about BOLI, bank-owned life insurance. This is what banks do. So I'm not rewriting the script. I'm just opening our eyes to the average American that there are financial tools out there. You don't have to be uber wealthy to participate in these things. You can start small, and over time, it's just like real estate. I had a buddy that started in real estate 5 years ago. Now he's a multi-millionaire in real estate, and he started with one freaking flip. Then he got into wholesaling, and then he got into, buy and holds and commercial. Now he's getting into Airbnbs. It's like you start somewhere, and 5 years may sound like a long time if you start now, but over the grand scheme of things, that's not a very long time.
It's not long at all. We get so our demographic, our age group gets so caught up in the immediate satisfaction, and the younger generation even worse, where it's like, I want to make $1 million next year. Well, you made 30 grand last year, so that's kind of a big step. How about we go for 100 first?
Mm-hmm.
And you have to have the long-term view without getting caught up in that short-term satisfaction.
Right.
It's the quickest way to zero, society. In my opinion.
Yep.
It's the quickest way to zero, and I feel like people need to go to zero at some point because they have to learn the risk involved.
That is so true. Some of the best lessons I learned in life, if we were to rewind prior to 2008, between me and my wife, we were making about $500,000 a year. And this is in our early 20s. I started at this firm, 9th largest lender in the country. We had a retail side and we had a wholesale side. We had thousands of loan officers nationwide, hundreds of executives and managers nationwide. So collectively, I ended up being a senior executive with that company, and she was one of the top loan officers. So collectively, in our 23, 24 year range, we're making $500,000, right? If 2008 hadn't happened to me, I would not have the type of characteristics, values, principles, and personality that I do today. So yes, you're right. A lot of people need to go back to rock bottom, which is what I did. Had to move back in with my parents as an adult at the age of 27.
Oh, that's easy, right? That's easy.
Yeah, no internet, no TV, had to read books. But those were the times when I really dove in, and I thought I was going to become a financial planner. I was like, I was terrible with money. I made a lot of money, but I was terrible with it. So I need to understand this money game. And so I started reading books on finances and how to manage finances, because I knew I'm resilient. I'm going to get back on top. And if I do, I need to be a good steward of it. So yes, hitting rock bottom is very much a blessing. At least it was for me, and it can be for a lot of people.
Well, I'm glad you didn't become a financial planner, because when you start that, you get indoctrinated into like the rich old boys club. And they're stuck ways of doing it from 1985 because they've been doing it for 30 years. This is the way to do it. And I don't think that our generations want to do what they did. I don't think Wall Street's going to be as fruitful as it was for the last 30 years. I don't think people want to give up control like they did over the last 30 years. I don't think people are stuck in a job that they hate for 30 years. They'll be able to pivot. So what we're teaching now, I think, is better for the generation of what they're actually looking for. Now, I say most financial planners, there are a few, and we have a few friends, mutual friends that actually do help clients that want control, that are entrepreneurs. But by and large, it's like you get stuck teaching the same old boring crap, locking your money up into these old school widgets. They just don't go anywhere. I mean, talk to grandma and grandpa at 65 years old, pulling money out of a 401k. They're in the highest tax bracket of their life because their house is paid off, the kids moved out, and they don't work anymore. No deductions, no tax credits, and everything's coming out as ordinary income. Now, all of a sudden, they're paying taxes on their Social Security, which they pay tax on to put it in. Now they're paying up to 85% of your Social Security as taxed as ordinary income on the way out. Again, how did the government get away from this? We had a war from a tax on tea, and now we're paying all these massive taxes, which is blows my mind, dude. So I'm glad that you created these products. Let's talk about Replace Your University really quick. You've created education that people can go. They don't have to go to college to learn this. They can sit in their home office on a Sunday morning and watch you guys teach all this.
Yeah, and I actually wouldn't recommend going to college to learn this. You're not going to.
Yeah, you never let college
Actually,
get in the way of your education. I'll tell you that.
no, exactly. Who was that? Who said that? Was that Warren Buffett?
Matt Love. We'll
No,
just say Matt Love said it.
Mark Twain. Mark
Oh, is
Twain.
that what it was?
Yeah, Mark Twain.
Okay.
Love that saying. But I was actually talking to a college teammate of mine that was in the office a couple of weeks ago, and he came up for some business and was hanging out in the office. And so he didn't quite know. He knew I was in finances, but he just thought it was mortgages. And I was like, it's quite the opposite of that. I used to be in mortgages, and now I'm kind of the antithesis of mortgages. So I explained it to him. He's like, holy crap. And we were in the same class, corporate finance. And I had to ask him, I was like, do you remember the name of our finance professor? And his last name was Singh, but I couldn't remember his first name. And he goes, yeah. I was like, can you imagine if we had a conversation today? Because I flunked. The first time I took it, I completely flunked out. The second time I took it, I got a C. I was like, I was probably one of his worst students.
My gosh, I passed.
Yes.
You remember Tommy Boy?
Like I said, I did just enough in order to qualify eligibility wise by a hair sometimes. And so I was explaining to him, I was like, can you imagine if we went back and had a conversation with him, and if he remembered me, which he probably doesn't, but I'm like, yeah, this is actually what I do today. He'd be like, dude, you were one of my worst students. How is it that you fell into this? So
what's the saying? A students work for C students, and B students work for the government, and B students work for the government.
Yeah. So true. But yeah, it's you were talking about 401ks. If you look at Fidelity, which was the highest holder of 401ks in 2022, they had a negative 23% return. And people
won't talk about it. They don't want to admit. They only brag about when it's up.
Exactly, and they also don't understand interrupted compounding interest versus uninterrupted compounding interest.
Bro, it is in compounding. And I refuse to call any sort of investment account a compounding account. If it goes backwards, you're not compounding.
Mm-hmm. If it goes to zero.
It goes to zero. Real estate can't go to zero. Stock can. And when it goes backwards, people say, well, I'm in the long run. It's compounding for 25 years. It's not compounding. Look at last year. What if you wanted to get out last year and it's down 20%? Redo the math from the beginning. You might get your money back after taxes.
Yeah, it was, I think 2020, towards the tail end of 2020. Maybe it was 2021. I've got a real close friend that was with the FBI, and would not just regular FBI. I mean, he would do some special missions and stuff for the FBI. But anyways, he was wanting to get out for years, and leading up to 2020, he's like, all right, I think this is my year. My 401k is where it can be, my pension's where it can be in order for me to get out. And then all of a sudden 2020 hits, and I was like, all right, man, when's this retirement party? And he's like, dude, I'm stuck for another 2 years. He's like, I took too big of a hit. And think about that. I mean, I equate it to also a mortgage, right? Or a house. Let's say, with this strategy, you can pay it off in, let's say 5 years. But with a different one, you can pay it off in 7 years. Like, no big deal. It's only 2 years. Like, really? It's all relative. Think about it. Let's say today, I said, Matt, your house is paid off, right? I mean, like Dave Ramsey says, and I'm not a fan of paying off your house anymore, but let's just say it was, like Dave Ramsey says, the grass feels different. You walk around with a little bit lighter load on your shoulders. And I said, oh, wait. No, sorry. We made a clerical error. You have another 24 months. Now it starts to become a little bit more relative. It's like, no, that's a big deal. It's just like my buddy who was an FBI agent, that he's like, another 2 years doing something I don't like is an eternity.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anything affected by the market is, I'm not saying completely avoid the market, but I'm not heavily involved in the market at all.
No. I don't know if it's ego or what. I just want to have a little more control off of what's going on and what my money's doing.
Yep.
And I think the society before us was brainwashed into thinking you have to be part of the market in order to succeed.
Mm-hmm.
Back in the 70s, companies had what's called pensions, where the company was involved with the risk of paying a pension for the retiree as long as they lived. It's not sustainable. My grandfather worked for the largest company in the world, General Motors. Mm-hmm. And at the end of his life, General Motors went bankrupt. You remember when that happened. Mm-hmm. And they cut his benefits. He was 84 years old.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, can you imagine?
Wow.
Like, thank goodness he had Alzheimer's at the time and he didn't really know what was going on and he passed away shortly after. But, he spent his last dollar. And
Mm.
so what the companies did then is they moved the risk of that sustainability to the consumer and they called it a 401k. And then they said, hey, we're going to match what you put in. So if you put in 3%, we'll put in 3%. Aren't we great? No, it's still not sustainable. People with a couple $100,000 expecting to retire and live on for 30 years off of, an asset that has never generated cash flow in their entire lives. We know Garrett Gunderson. I went and saw Garrett a couple of weeks ago. He said, imagine trying to say, all right, in 10 years, I'm going to go run a marathon. Never ran before, but I'm going to run a marathon in 10 years. You're going to fail. It's like saying you're going to put your retirement assets to work for you and having never talked about it. And that's the most frustrating part in the financial world is meeting a 62-year-old who's never had a conversation on how to actually spend their money. They have a big account value, but what do they care about? Account value or cash flow? And advisors aren't trained to talk about cash flow. And then enter annuities, which I think annuities can be a great thing, but it's a pretty limiting solution. The liquidity goes away and you have guarantees, but it's a Band-Aid on a much bigger problem.
Right. And you talk about this too. We have tons of proof and case studies around us that we're not talking crap here. We're talking about things that are very valid and have been valid for a very long time. And you look at the two families, the Rockefellers and the Vanderbilts. I know Garrett gets into that a lot. I'm sure you do too. Yep. I talk about it ad nauseum. But the Rockefellers continue to expand their wealth. It's because they do exactly what we've been talking about, where the Vanderbilts did the complete opposite. Anderson Cooper, who's a descendant of the Vanderbilts, it's like, I didn't get a penny. That money's been long gone. But the Rockefellers continue to grow their wealth and pass it on generation to generation, while somewhat avoiding a large amount of taxes too. It's like we have these case studies all around us that if we just took the time to investigate it, we'd realize that it's a lot more common sense.
Which is the value too from today versus 15 years ago, because 15 years ago, I heard something, and I don't know how true this is. Merrill Lynch, someone had to have a net worth of over $10 million before they would even be allowed to talk about the value of life insurance. Because they get the fees on the 10 million and now they're creating an estate problem. And then they're going to talk about life insurance as an estate issue. But for the Rockefellers, it came down to two products, life insurance and trusts. The reason that tax code is written is not how you can pay more. Here's how to pay more tax. It's here's how to avoid taxation. Set up things properly. Now they made it confusing in 72,000 pages, which they keep adding more. But the tax code is written to teach you how to avoid unnecessary taxation. And if you look at the Rockefellers, not only are they successful, people hate successful people nowadays, which I think that's going to continue to trend, this populist mentality, and they blame the rich. They're still giving away $50 million a year to charity and charitable organizations. So they're not only allowed to or compounding their net worth, they're still giving. And the problem that I find with the narrative of tax the rich, and then they talk about income tax. The income tax doesn't tax the rich. It taxes your ability to get rich. Wealthy people hardly earn income. It's usually passive income off of dividends or growth of assets, which is a different category called capital gains. Now, this isn't tax advice, obviously, but look it up. And now when they're saying, you make $500,000, I've had family members tell me this. You make a bunch of money. I consider you wealthy. I go, when I met my wife, your family member, I had a 1-bedroom apartment. I'm not rich. I have a good income, but I'm not rich. You want to hurt my ability to take care of my family. Meanwhile, billionaires are making even more money because of what they're doing. And you want to do what Dave Ramsey teaches to keep you suppressed in life. And you want to blame the rich people. And then you're taxing the ability to get rich. You're taxing yourself and the ability to help your own family. And you think that's going to solve it because you think the government has access to my money that's going to help you more than if I have access to my money? What kind of backwards thought is that?
Yeah, we send 165 billion of that over to Ukraine.
Dude, if that doesn't blow your mind in a time where you have, you're in the military stuff, these veterans that are having such a hard time, cool, they get benefits with getting loans and things, but they're not doing wonderful. And we're giving billions to a country that Vivek they just had the Republican debates, which I think is funny. Vivek said the one thing that just blew the whole thing away is like, these people want to send your kids to another country to defend a province they don't even know the name of.
Yeah.
And all three of them sat there blank. I was like,
now,
oh my gosh.
I don't know this to be true, but I did see this, that Zelensky now has bought his second yacht. Not his first, his second yacht. It's like, you don't think our taxpayers you don't think that it's going to things like that. You think it's all good and it's really this fight against Russia.
Yeah.
No, it's a Ponzi scheme. It's a funnel of money back to, make people rich. And that's our tax dollars.
Ron Paul said something once. I think he said, war is all about taxing rich countries, taxing poor people to give to poor countries, to give to more rich people in poor countries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you and I have talked about this, I think, here at my office. How that dude is still alive is beyond me. And it's not because of his age or his health. It's because of his rhetoric.
Yeah.
The dude is anti-central bank. And, we could go back in history and name all of the examples between Abraham Lincoln, Bill McKinley to JFK, all these presidents and leaders that were against the Federal Reserve. You want to get on a hit list? Be anti-Federal Reserve. Be anti-central bank. How he's avoided suicide.
Yeah. Yeah, right. The Clinton suicide.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Yeah, dude, it's crazy. So I love what you're doing, man, because I had an epiphany. I spent years helping the retirees, and then I'm thinking, man, I'm never going to be in this position. I want to get out of this, and I just want to help entrepreneurs find the permission to take a step out in their own faith, because they are their biggest asset. Inside of you is, you'll never get a bigger rate of return than believing in yourself and taking action. And then financially, how can I tactically set myself up to do it? It's the same stuff that you're teaching with HELOCs, paying yourself first, life insurance to take care of your family, and then leveraging other people's money to go do stuff with it while your assets continue to grow. I think it's so valuable, man. I really think that that's what society wants. I think this is a good conversation. We should probably do this again. Because we didn't even really get into your background of like how you got started in all this. You started out after you went to finance in college, then you got into mortgages.
Yeah, fell into it. Like I said, I went to college just to play ball. It wasn't for anything other than that, to be honest with you. But I had a health issue my junior year in college, heart failure, and quickly learned that, okay, a career outside of college, pro basketball, is not on the horizon for me. 6'3", white dude. That should have been my first clue. But nonetheless, I had a buddy that graduated ahead of me, and he went to work for this firm. And he came by my house one day and was like, hey, I think you'd be really good at this. This is what I do. And I was like, what is it? He's like, it's selling mortgages. I was like, I don't know anything about that. Doesn't appeal to me. No. In fact, I was talking to another buddy that this is crazy. He was basically an employee, but one of his buddies in Special Forces owned a contracting business. And so I was set to actually head over to Bogota, Colombia, to patrol a pipeline called Occidental Pipeline. And it was going to pay well. So I'm about to do that. I'm like, when I say pay well, $10,000 a month, right? Back then, that's a lot. Really good money. Heck, it's still good money today. So anyways, I had this crazy thing. So I'm training for it. And then my buddy calls and says, well, let's do this. And I was like, no, I don't think so. And then it was another time he came over, and he had the sheet of all the commission checks, the top performers at the office. And he showed it to me, and I was like, "You're making that kind of money?" He goes, well, I'm not, but the top performers are. And he's like, and I think you've got what it takes to be one of these guys. So I was like, oh, heck yeah, let me explore this. I said, get me an interview. So he got me an interview, but I go into it with no credentials, no sales background. I don't know anything about mortgages. All I've really got to fall back on is I'm competitive and I like talking to people. And so I came up with this plan that as I go in to meet this gentleman, who is the top performer in the office, and I make this bold claim. I was like, listen, I understand on my resume, I don't have a whole lot to fall back on. And you're maybe looking at me no different than you would from a server at Waffle House. And like, why would I hire this guy? I said, but I can promise you this. I'll guarantee you this. I said, who's the top performer? And he said, well, last year it was Natalie Webb. I said, okay. I said, if you hire me, I will double her numbers this year. And he's like, really? I said, guaranteed. Now, I didn't truly have that kind of confidence. I just wanted to land the interview and land the job, right? I didn't know what I was just backing myself into a corner. I was like, let me just land this first step, then I'll figure it out once I'm in the door.
Perfect.
And so he called me later on that night. Sorry, getting a phone call from my wife. So I get a phone call that night, and he says, "Hey, we're going to hire you." Perfect. Exactly what my plan was. It worked. And honestly, I totally forgot about my bold claim after a few short months. But then you fast forward, October of that year, I got hired in January. We go through an extensive training, about 3 to 4 week training. And fast forward to October, we had this, what we call the bullpen. So it was this probably 50-yard long room where all the loan officers sat in there. The senior vice president gives a meeting every morning, walks around the room, he's throwing objections at people, and he threw one at me. And, I was highly trained. I will say this about that institution. I mean, we were trained by the best. To this day, I still know the 7 steps of the first call, the 6 steps of the second call, the 5 steps of overcoming an objection, what the 5 benefits were, payment, cash, tax, term, deferral. I mean, I still have, it's ingrained in me. And so really good training. So, I go through the motions. I did exactly what we're trained to do. And he says, okay, that was really good. And he said, I'm here to tell everybody, we normally don't announce this until end of December or January, towards the end of the year. But Michael is so far ahead that nobody has an opportunity to catch him. So I'm here to announce that you are the winner of Newcomer of the Year award. And we're going to fly you to New York and have dinner at Tavern on the Green and present your award to you. So I'm just going to let the cat out of the bag. And then he reminded me of what I said on my interview. I had totally forgotten. And it almost got me in tears because I was just like, I totally forgot. I was just going through the motions. And I was just trying to do the best that I could. And I totally forgot that I made this bold claim. He's like, yeah, you made this claim. And lo and behold, here we are today. So a man of his word, little does he know that I didn't truly believe that. I just wanted to land the job. And that company, fast forward, eventually went bankrupt on my birthday in 2007. Everybody knows the story of the real estate market back then. It was like they just pulled the brakes on it, and it was foreclosure after foreclosure after foreclosure. We were a subprime company. That entire secondary market dried up. Yep. So on my birthday, 2007, they fold and laid everybody off, no severance. And so I go from this great income to nothing. And you're like, well, you still had a lot of income, so you probably still had a lot saved up. No, dude, I spent every single dollar that came in.
You're in your 20s, man.
Yes, at one point I had a Denali and an Escalade and a BMW and a custom chopper and a 4-wheeler on top of my 4,000 square foot house. So, and I didn't pay cash for any of it, right?
Yeah.
So, there was one month I made $67,000, and I remember back then the Escalade EXT, it was the truck version of the Escalade. It was $63,000 price tag. Now you probably couldn't get one for less than 100, but anyways, it was $63,000. I just made 67. No, I'm going to finance it. So I did, and it all came crashing down. And I was able to weather the storm for a little bit, like maybe a year. But I was also dumping money into this real estate golf course outside of Little Rock, Arkansas. So I was burning through cash quick, and it finally got to the point where I was just like, can't afford the house, can't afford the cars, motorcycle, 4-wheeler, nothing. And my parents had a vacant home on our farm in Dixon, Tennessee, that they had recently renovated. And I said, I need shelter. And they're like, cool, come here. And so me and my wife moved in with them. And like I said, barely could afford groceries. I mean, there was one embarrassing time where we went to Walmart and to get groceries and had to take stuff back. You've got that long line behind you, so it's embarrassing. So every subsequent trip to Walmart now, I've got my phone out and I'm calculating everything she's putting into the cart plus 9.25% tax, just so because we knew how much we had in our account, and I didn't want to be embarrassed again.
It's a horrible feeling. When I was 25, I had just graduated with a master's, and I had a job, $37,000 a year, and I went to the Kroger's by my house, and card was declined. Three people behind me, and I go, oh, you know what? I have my other card out in the car. Let me go run and grab my other card. Man, I got my keys out and left that parking lot so fast. I never went back in.
That's funny.
I never showed my face there ever again, dude.
Another story from that was my car, pretty close to my birthday. And my car was a Cadillac Escalade. I had gotten rid of the Denali because I totaled it. And some of the other stuff, but I still had my Escalade. And I remember the payment was just under $1,000 a month, which is just absolutely absurd. But anyways, it got repoed in the middle of the night. I remember hearing a truck pull up in the driveway. And again, this is on a farm. So you're like, who's pulling up at 1 o'clock in the morning? Me and my wife are asleep. And yeah, sure enough, I'm out there helping him get everything out of my truck so he can hook it up to the tow truck and pull it away. Well, fast forward, 2018, maybe 2017, we built a house. Not to brag, but just to kind of show you how you go from dirt poor to, and not really dirt poor. In this country, I don't believe in dirt poor. I visited Guatemala and all these other third world countries, and poor in America is not poor like you would see in third world countries. So we had shelter, we had food, we had transportation. So we weren't poor, but we felt poor relative to American terms. But you fast forward to 2017, I've got this $2.2 million house, and I can afford landscapers to come in and do it, so I'm not having to do it. And this landscaper on one trip, he was chatty Cathy dude. It sometimes would even annoy me. It's like I'd go out just to say hey and to pay him or whatnot. It turns into a 30-minute conversation. Like, my goodness, dude, I got stuff to do. But he finally hit me with it one day, and he's like, man, I've been doing this a while for you, and you don't remember me, do you? And I was like, no, should I? He goes, yeah. He's like, this has been on my mind for a while, and I just didn't know if I should even bring it up. I don't want to embarrass you or anything. And, prior to this, I'd written a book in 2014 where I lay out this entire story and just make it public, which is another whole conversation too about being authentic, because I wasn't. Like I said, if I didn't go broke, you would not want to meet the Michael back then. Arrogant, rich, what I considered rich, and just, I was not a cool person to hang out with, but I needed to be humbled, and God knew that. So anyways, I was like, I'm going to be authentic, write this book about my story. And he's in that book. But anyways, he said, years ago, at this point, probably 10 years. He goes, 10 years ago, I repoed your truck. I was like, really? He goes, yeah. He's like, I didn't know if I should even bring it up or anything, but I've met you before, and I actually repoed your truck. And I just, scared to kind of bring it up because I didn't want to embarrass you. I was like, no, dude, you're in my book. I was like, this is public knowledge. It doesn't embarrass me at all. He's like, it's just really cool that, 10 years ago, I repoed your truck, and, I look at this house and this farm you got in Leaper's Fork. And I'm like, it's really cool. How'd you do it? So, now the 30-minute conversation turns into 2.5-hour conversation. It's dark and he didn't even finish my yard. But
yeah, that's awesome, man. The redemption is, you talk about the American story. And you have to hit zero to not only appreciate it, but I think to even get as far as you've gotten. And I think that's something that so many Americans not only miss out on, they live in this bitter and anger world where they see other people succeed more, and it's called jealousy. And I heard somebody talking about it. I don't know if it was Munger or something. The world's not greedy. The world is jealous. And that's the sad part, because we live in America. You have the opportunity to get out of your own way every day, and there's free education all over the place. So I'm going to let you go. I know we're coming up on an hour here. I'm going to put some links to your stuff in the description of this down below, but give us some insight. What's the easiest way to get a hold of you guys? Where should someone start to learn about how to replace your mortgage and all the other products that you have?
If you can get to it from Replace Your University, but if you just are only interested in Replace Your Mortgage, go to replaceyourmortgage.com. But you can also get to it from replaceyouruniversity.com, where we've got 5 verticals there on day trading, real estate investing, to this HELOC strategy or simple interest line of credit strategy. So if you want to go to replaceyourmortgage.com, we have tons of free information. So don't be scared that if you go there, it's like, okay, I got to start whipping out my credit card. No. You sign up with a free account and start watching all the free information and determine if this makes sense for you. And if it resonates with you, then there's an option there to just book a call with one of our account executives where they'll analyze your finances and see if you're a good fit. 70% of the people we talk to, it's not a good fit for, just because that's where the average American is right now. However, there's 30% that's like, okay, this is a no-brainer, and we'll just do the math and lay the math out and say, which one do you want? You want to pay for 2 homes now that you purchased a house on a 30-year mortgage? You're buying one house for you and one for the bank. However, the first house you pay off is the bank's house. Or you could do it this way, and the math doesn't lie. We've got a saying, it's math, not magic. So You can book a call. That's also free. And then you can determine if you want to become one of our students and sign up for consulting and coaching, and we can kind of walk you step by step through the process.
I love it, man. Keep fighting the good fight. Show people what the options are. So thanks for being here. We'll put the descriptions down below. Mike, hope to see you soon, man. We got to do this again.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Matt.
All right. See you, buddy.